You're listening to the Rainmaking Podcast, hosted by high-stakes headhunter, author, and professional speaker, Scott Love.
You're listening to the Rainmaking Podcast, and my name is Scott Love, your host, and thank you for joining me on our show. If you're not familiar with the Rainmaking Podcast, this is a show that's going to give you tremendous value if your goal is to grow closer to your clients. If you're in professional services, in a client development role, whether you're an attorney or you're a recruiter in the accounting industry, professional services, even investment banking, you have to earn trust from your prospects. And that's what I try to carry through on the theme of this particular podcast. We're almost at 200 episodes, and I can't believe it. And I'm grateful for you to make that possible. Now, in today's episode, I'm going to talk about client development strategy. This is something I'm going to share, things that I've learned. But before I do that, I want to offer some thanks. I want to thank those people that have hired me to speak to their group. Companies like Patrice and Associates, Pride Staff, G.A. Rogers, Top Echelon. I spoke at their conference a few weeks ago and even got to meet with Titan Placement, a small up-and-coming recruiting firm where they've got some very successful rookies that are smart enough to really follow systems of success. If one person can do something, so can somebody else. Now, why do I speak to groups on client development? Honestly, I really make my money in placements. I recruit attorneys for global law firms, and I'm kind of niching in the private equity space. That's my business. But what I love is helping somebody shorten that learning curve. I've been recruiting since 1995. And the thing about the executive search and recruiting industry is that I think it's the purest form of sales. You have to sell your services to an organization. Then you have to go out there and find prospective candidates and sell the opportunity to them. And at its core is earning trust. And that's something that I absolutely love. I've thought about quitting recruiting and just speaking full time, but then again, I like being home, and I like the work of doing deals. There's nothing more exciting to me than earning trust from a sophisticated prospect that's at a critical time in their life where they're feeling tremendous stress and they're guarded and they're risking a lot to even talk with a headhunter like me. And they put their trust in me to help them find an opportunity that works best for them. I love doing that. That's what motivates me. But when I speak to groups, whether they're in other professional services or recruiting groups or staffing teams, I like helping them shorten the learning curve. And that's one of the things I want to do with you today, is give you some strategic words of wisdom that I think can solve most of your frustrations in client development. Now, let me tell you a little bit about the background of how I came to understand client development. About 20 years ago, I started speaking at conferences, and I'd go to Las Vegas to speak at sales meetings, and I'd get there a day early, and I'd see all these games, and I don't want to gamble. I don't want to put money on a table unless I know that I've got a high likelihood of a favorable outcome. But when you're playing games like craps and roulette, it's a gamble. So what's the point in that? Some people, it's entertainment. But I heard that there was one game that had a memory that you can predict what the future is going to be based on the trends and the patterns. And it's a game of blackjack. And I read books on this, and I got really good at counting cards. I got really good. I didn't drink whenever I played. I was very disciplined about that. I always tracked my metrics and my numbers, and I was very smart about where I played, what time I played. If I was upset about something, I wouldn't play. And it was a side business for me. I didn't make a lot of money, but I made some. And then I wanted to take it to a whole new level. And I reached out to two alumni of the legendary MIT blackjack team. If you've ever seen the movie 21, that is the MIT blackjack team that the whole movie and the book that the movie was based on came from. Two of them had a business. I reached out to them and I said, listen, I'll consult to you on client development. I won't charge you. You help me with my game, and you don't charge me. And so for a year and a half, they actually mentored me with my game. I was getting really good. I remember the first time I was ever kicked out of a casino. It was at a casino called the Barbary Coast. It doesn't exist anymore. I was counting cards with two ladies from Dallas, Texas that were visiting, and we were winning. And I got a tap on the shoulder from the pit boss. And he looked at me and said, sir, you need to refrain from playing blackjack for the rest of the evening. And I looked up at him and I said, why would I do that? Why would I quit playing something? And he said, well, help yourself to craps and roulette. And I said, well, that would be like gambling. Why would I do that? Okay, smarty pants, out you go. And so after a year and a half, I didn't like playing the game. It was 8 hours of doing math equations in smoky environments. and I quit. I just didn't like it. But what did I learn from that experience? I learned that we look at variables, and when we see that variables align to where we have a higher likelihood of a favorable outcome, then we bet a proportionate amount of our value according on what the probabilities are. And for example, in the game of blackjack, you would pay attention to what's called the count, which tells you how many more high-value cards are left over compared to low-value cards, because in that game, the high-value cards favor the player. The low-value cards favor the house or the casino. And when they're in a shoe, that's a finite number of cards left. And when we see how many decks are left in that shoe, we're able to bet in somewhat of a proportion to what the likelihood is of us winning. So when the count would go high, you would bet more, and you would bet in proportion to what your advantage is based on what the count is. If the count went to 0 or below that, you would sit out of your hand, and you would only put money on the felt when you knew that you had a favorable likelihood of winning. We can apply those same concepts to client development. And when I speak at conferences, I speak at a lot of conferences in Las Vegas because the theme of my topic, it fits in with most of the themes of all the sales meetings in Las Vegas. And I'm able to tell that story because it's kind of different. You just don't hear that every day. You don't find a lot of Eagle Scouts that became professional gamblers. Now, like I said, I didn't make a lot of money. I made some, not a lot, but the whole experience taught me that we need to make decisions based on game theory. And when we take our client development strategy and we focus it in areas that have a high likelihood of a favorable outcome, and if we know that if we spend time in areas that have better odds, even if we don't achieve our ultimate goal, we still want to have something to show for our time. What does this mean in terms of where we go forward and getting more business? So I'm going to share with you 5 paths of getting business. And this is at the epicenter of my whole strategy that I teach people in terms of client development. Think of it like this. At the top of the list are those areas that have the highest likelihood of bearing fruit, of getting us business. At the bottom of the list are those areas that have the least likelihood of getting us business. So I want you to do this. If you're driving, don't do this. If you're in your car, please don't write this down. Come back and listen to it again and do it. But at the top of the list, I want you to write this down. It's called existing clients. That's the area where you have the highest likelihood of getting business. I remember the first time I figured this out. I was living in Phoenix. My niche was commercial construction at the time. One of my clients worked for a company called Gilbane, a big construction company that had a new office in Arizona. And I got to know their managing partner in Arizona. And we became friends, and I was doing some work for him. And I said, let's go to lunch. And he said, sure, come by the office before we go. And I went there. And he introduced me around the office before we left for lunch to about 4 of his leaders on his team. One was the chief estimator. And he said, Scott, we're looking for more people. Can you help us with that? The other one was a project executive spearheading healthcare construction projects. I'm looking for project managers. Can you help me? And I met 2 other executive leaders, and I walked out of there with about 7 or 8 new Class A search assignments from one meeting. And that's when I realized that an existing client, somebody there that's already hired you, where you've been able to earn trust, you've been able to show them that you can produce and solve their problems, that has the highest likelihood of giving you more business. So let me kind of press pause here, so to speak, and ask you to do this. Reach out to those where you've already added value over the years. Are there companies and organizations where you have done work with them, no matter whatever you do, whether you're an attorney or an accountant or whatever the work is? Maybe you should reach back out to them. And I wouldn't even do it this way and say, hey, I need more business. Reach out. How are you? Let's connect. I'm seeing some trends in the market, and I thought it might be good for us to discuss some of those. You don't want to just go for the close right away. Reconnect. Let it happen organically. I think the overarching theme of reaching out with people, and this is since post-COVID, is curiosity. Having curiosity with no ultimate aim except to connect and to be curious, and maybe there are opportunities where you can add value. So that's number 1. I'd be willing to bet that if you spent 5 minutes and you made a list of 5 past clients and you reached out to them, you'd get something to show for it. That's number 1. That's your highest likelihood of getting business. Number one, existing clients. Number two, below that are people that know you. How can you become someone that people know? I think the easiest way to do that is to attend conferences within your niche. For example, I've got a friend who's an investment banker, and he knows that he can go to certain conferences in the niches where he works just to build friendships. He'll speak at conferences so that people know him. His name's Patrick Morin. He's someone that's kind of a new friend of mine. He lives here in the area, and I didn't get a chance to meet him until we flew across the country to Napa, and I spoke at a conference for an organization called TempNet. And sure enough, his office was 2 miles away from my office, and I saw how he does business. It's pretty soft. He's someone that has built a name, and he speaks at many conferences just so people can know him. Now, when you can meet a large population of people, you obviously have a greater pool of people to pull from in terms of client development. And what's interesting is that then they start to come to you. So I'd recommend put yourself out there and go to certain conferences wherever your niche is. Attend them. Get involved. If you can serve on a board because you're going to get to meet a lot of people that way, maybe even client prospects. So that's the second highest likelihood of getting business, people that know you. I'd recommend that you do this. Make a list of 5 non-clients, people that you know, people that you've met at conferences. Maybe you've made pitches to sell work and you didn't get it, and make it a point to reconnect with them with no agenda. I'm seeing some trends in the market. I thought it might be good to talk about those. And either way, it would be great to connect. That's number 2. That's your second highest likelihood of getting business. Number 3, this is a good one, referrals. One of my friends, Bill Cates, that's BILLCATES.com. That's his website address. And I'm even going to put that on the show notes. He's written books on getting referrals. Did you know that you can actually set up systems of how to get referrals? What if you actually made a priority of building in systems and structure to your business that you can allow referrals to take place? If something is worth doing, it's worth studying. Think of how much time and money you spent going to college and paying for your degree, and all the time you spent learning things that you're not using. Well, what if you spent a fraction of that and invested it in areas that will give you a return? I'd recommend becoming an expert on how to get referrals within your own niche. Check out Bill's website. He's got a lot of resources out there. I've seen him speak before. He's actually been a guest on our show a couple of times. So make sure you check that out. Learn how to become an expert at getting referrals from your niche. That's your third highest likelihood of getting business. Number 4, people that have heard of you. So if you go to these conferences where you're meeting people that you might be able to do business with, and let's just say you sit on a panel of discussion talking about best practices of whatever it is that you do in your niche. What if you were able to sit on a panel and meet the leaders of an association? What if you were able to even to give a presentation on best practices of whatever it is that you do, and you give away your best ideas? What if you could find strategic alliance partners, people that are vendors that serve your niche? What's the best place to find that? Well, remember I talked about those trade associations? Go to their websites and look at their platinum sponsors, their gold sponsors, their silver sponsors. Those are people that have invested money in getting to know people in your niche. What if you reached out to them? I'd be willing to bet that no matter what you do, if you're a wealth manager, if you're an attorney, if you're an accountant, I'd be willing to bet that if you reached out to them and said, I'd like to do a free 30-minute webinar for your constituents, they might be able to market you and put you in front of all the people that they're trying to get attention from, and your content becomes that shiny lure that can help those people connect with you and that strategic alliance partner. That's something I've done over the years with great success, and I'm always surprised why a lot of people don't pursue that. It takes some time and it takes some effort, but what you're doing, you're building a base. You're becoming micro-famous within a certain niche. And when you are introduced to people and they can say, I've heard of you before, now you're getting somewhere. Just this week, I reached out to the head of a significant firm in a significant role to try to recruit him. And he called me and he said, I don't want to leave, but I want you to work for us. And I said, I'm honored. And he said, I've heard of you. And I don't know how he did, and I'm not a big deal. I promise you that. There's people that do recruiting that are much more adept than me, but I've been able to do the work to get noticed and to build a name. Thank God. And I'm telling you, it's a system. Anybody can do it. I really believe that. But he said, I've heard of you. That is what you want in business development. Now, number 5, the area that has the least likelihood of bearing fruit. You know what that is. It's cold. But why is it that so many people spend most of their time trying to get business from people that they've never done work with before? They don't know. There's no connections, and they've never heard of them. They're extremely cold. That is the way people have done it traditionally. Now, when you understand game theory, you want to put your money on the felt when you know that you have a high likelihood of a favorable return, and you want to bet in proportion to your advantage. That's why I don't even like gambling, except I'll play in poker tournaments, maybe small stakes cash games. But really, in professional services, it is a game. When you think of your professional services business as a game, then you turn it into what one of my friends, Don Ancona, who's the founder of Sendius Executive Search in Albuquerque, he calls it a can't-lose casino. You can turn your business into a can't-lose casino when you understand which actions can give you a return and which ones have a higher likelihood of giving you a greater return. And put your time and your effort in that. Think of it like this, and these are my final thoughts. Think of the 80-20 rule. 80% of your business comes from 20% of your clients. 80% of your business comes from 20% of your efforts. Well, just focus on the 20% of your efforts. That gives you the greater return. That's game theory. I hope that this program has given you some ideas worth studying. Reach out to me if you want to talk about this in greater detail. And as always, this episode is sponsored by Leopard Solutions, legal intelligence suite of products, Firmscape, and Leopard BI. Push ahead of the pack with the power of Leopard. Thanks again for listening, and we'll catch you next time on the Rainmaking Podcast.
Thank you for listening to the Rainmaking Podcast. For more information about our recruiting services for international law firms, visit our website at attorneysearchgroup.com. To inquire about having Scott speak at your next convention, conference, sales meeting, or executive retreat, visit the rainmakingpodcast.com.